everybody happy Thanksgiving. Why don't we stand on our feet and get ready to sing?
Heaven thundered and the world goes by. Life begins and ends in the dust you fall. Faith commanded and the mountains move. Fear is losing ground to our hope in you.
again, good morning. Happy Thanksgiving weekend to you. Before you have a seat, turn and say hello to the people you're around.
Yeah, start it over again. I get the feeling that we're losing. Harder to keep it than it was to start. I can't feel it, I can fall apart. Better than we fall in love. I can't feel it, I can fall.
Well, go ahead and have a seat. Good morning and welcome to Crossroads. My name is Dylan Curtis. I'm the communications director here. I hope all of you had a great Thanksgiving. There's a lot to be thankful for, including the Chiefs beating the Broncos tonight. Yeah. Hey, there's more Chiefs fans in here than I thought. Or they're just other AFC West fans, but I'll take it. Well, here at Crossroads, we're thankful this weekend for all of you who took part in our Stuff the Truck food drive. You donated 8,500 pounds of food. Yeah, it's the most in 6 years. I know our partners over at the House of Neighborly Service were blown away by all of your generosity, so thank you for those who took part. Well, as we close in on December, the Christmas season is right around the corner, and we have a lot of events coming up. So if you could take out your program, I'll highlight a few items for everyone. We're kicking off the Christmas season with our December weekend series, A Thrill of Hope. There's a card in your program that will show you all the events coming up. We have next weekend baby dedications, kids choir. On Saturday night, we're having a chili supper. And on the back of that card, you can see the entire calendar. We have something every single weekend for the whole family. There's also a card in your program for Christmas at Crossroads. Thousands of people attend our Christmas services. We have 6 candlelight services planned for December 23rd and December 24th. I encourage all of you to invite your friends and family, because one invite could change an entire life. Well, with 4,000 people attending our services last year, we think it's important that those are inspirational and welcoming experiences for the whole community. So we're asking for your help. There's a Christmas Serve sign-up sheet in each of your programs that will highlight all the different opportunities we have for both adult and kids programs. And each of you is essential in making that a memorable time for everybody who comes. Well, we think the Christmas season is also all about gratitude. Giving is one of the ways that we say thank you to God for all that He's done for us this year. So we're having our Christmas offering dedication weekend on December 17th and 18th. There's a card and an envelope in your program that will describe more about our Christmas offering. One of my favorite things that we're doing this year is giving the first 10% away to a local compassion and justice organization. Well, it looks like our hosts are ready to come and receive our offerings. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for this wonderful time of year, a time where we can celebrate one another and be grateful for all that we have. A moment where we can spend time with family and friends, filled with joy and laughter. And I pray for those who may find this season difficult. I pray that your love and peace would enter their lives. For those of us who know someone in need, I pray that we would reach out and help them with a kind heart. So God, I thank you for this time and these people. Be with us through the rest of this service and reveal yourself as we worship together. In Jesus' name, amen.
my vacant heart. Lord, you came and made a home. You bring light to the dark in me. When I lose my way, I'm beckoned into grace. You alone are my everything. In your love brings me to my knees, brings me to my knees. My King forever, you are all my heart desires till the end of time. My soul surrender. Why don't you stand and join us with this one? No
So we're just about all set for the second heat in the women's 5,000 metres. All eyes will be on Almaz Ayana, the new world record holder over 10,000 metres. Nikki Hamlin there, she's had a Commonwealth medal over the years. D'Agostino of the USA giving the camera a little wave. 2 heats, 5 fastest loser spot.
Ayana is now leaving the back straight and the rest of the pack has just entered the back straight. Oops, there's a fall at the back of the field here. There's a couple of runners down. And the other athlete who's fallen has decided to stop back there with her, and she is in a lot of trouble, D'Agostino.
It's D'Agostino and Nikki Hamlin. Hamlin stumbles on the inside line and then a really nasty fall and an ankle problem there for D'Agostino.
The American was initially showing more concern and then realised how much pain she was in.
D'Agostino is going to finish this race. It's going to be a very, very painful mile for the American. Brave performance to carry on. D'Agostino is being passed now by Almaz Ayana. It really will be an emotional finish to her race, which will come way after the top 5 qualifiers. Abby D'Agostino, tears of frustration, and maybe, hopefully one day, she will look back on this as a moment of great pride, embraced by the woman whose aspirations also came to an end. The ankle clearly hurting. As she decided to finish the race, and that is the very embodiment of the Olympic spirit, alive and well here in Rio in 2016.
How many of you remember who won the 5,000 meter race? Who got how many? Nobody remembers who won. But that moment you just saw there was hailed as the most beautiful moment of the entire Summer Olympics. Not because of where these women finished. They didn't medal. But it was how they finished and how they ran. And there would have been a lot of people who said to Abby D'Agostino when she was down on the track, look, you've got no chance. Just stay down. Just quit. And then when she began to run in all that pain, which was later discovered she had a torn ACL, a torn meniscus, and a stressed MCL, and she completed that 5K race with all that damage. There would have been people who said, just stop. But those 2 women will not be remembered for how they began the race. They began the race with high hopes like everybody else of a gold medal. But they'll always be remembered for how they ran and how they finished, not where they finished. And that's true for us too, isn't it? In our lives. We all begin our lives with high hopes and dreams. But for how many of you would you say, you know what, Dennis? I've accomplished, my life has gone just exactly like I had dreamed it would. No, it hasn't. We found ourselves tripped up along the way, haven't we? We found ourselves down on the track. We found ourselves running at the back of the pack being lapped by the leaders. We found ourselves having to run with a great deal of pain. And how do we do it? How do we do it? Why do we do it? And if you haven't faced something like that, something that knocks you flat on the track, well, don't look behind you because it's coming. It is. It's coming. And there's a part of the Bible that we're looking at today that is so encouraging and so helpful when we're going to face these hardships of life. And and oftentimes the New Testament uses the image, the metaphor of a race to parallel with our lives. And Hebrews 12 is one of them. And I'm going to read it. It's printed in your program notes. You can pull them out right now. And let me read this amazing section. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And let us run at fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. And you have completely forgotten, and have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God's treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you're not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline is pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. And the first thing that's clear from this passage is that life is a race. It says, run with perseverance the race. In fact, the Greek word for race there is agon. And it's the word from which we get the word agony. Race and agony go together. It means that life is a struggle, especially if we understand that life is a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, if you watch the sprinters at the Olympics, when they finished, there wasn't much agony on their faces. Who has agony on their faces? The marathon runners. And the word agon can also be translated wrestling match. In verse 4, it says, in your struggle, in your wrestling against sin. In fact, the same word is agon there. And the Bible reference books that I read talked about that the context of this passage was the Olympics. You know, the Greeks thought up the Olympics. And the ultimate challenge in the Olympics was the pentathlon, where there was running and jumping and discus and javelin. And the climax of it was this full contact boxing, cage, mixed martial arts fight where they would strap some kind of leather device on their hand and they would just pummel each other until they bled. That's how they finished that. And so what the writer of Hebrews is saying is that life is a struggle. Life is a boxing match. It's a wrestling match. How about that for an up metaphor for life, huh? Yeah. Life is this agonizing race, you know, that old bumper sticker. Life is hard, and then you die. Is that what this is talking about here? Well, not exactly. But here's why this section is so important. It's because our theory of life, our view, our expectation of life will determine how we process hardship, how we process suffering. What seems to be the ultimate goal or theory, life theory for most Americans? It's this: I want to maximize happiness and comfort. So many people say this: I don't know where I came from, and I don't know what's going to happen to me after I die, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab for all the happiness that I can now. And the goal of life becomes not to suffer, not to wrestle, to eliminate that. So instead of picking a race or wrestling match as their theory of life, they pick a beer commercial, Corona, right? Lying on the beach, just kind of toasting each other, and that's their hope and dream in life. Well, if that's our theory of life and our expectation, when we get hammered, when we get struck by hardship, we're just going to simply melt down. People will scream, they'll holler, they'll blame themselves. A lot of people blame God. They begin to question, how could a loving and caring God allow this to happen to me? And so oftentimes they just walk away from God instead of adjusting their view of reality. One author I read said that more than half of the pain we experience when difficulties happen isn't due to difficulty at all. It's due to our confusion, our shock, our self-pity over the fact that somehow it's happening to me. Half the pain isn't from the event, it's from our inability to process that event. And it's because we're very ill prepared for suffering when it comes. And if our theory of life, though, our view of reality doesn't match up with this section that I just read, when we get tripped up, or we go down, or we experience or pain, or we have to take a punch, we're going to simply quit or get bitter or join the blame game. Now, don't get me wrong. Suffering hurts. It does. It always hurts. And we'll scream. We may cry. We may want to shut ourselves off from the world. But we're going to have to figure out, how am I going to get up and run with this pain? But there's a way to actually do this that helps us become people of greatness, that actually helps us become people of character, that actually helps us in our lives, helps us win this race. And verse 7 gives us the key. It says, run with perseverance. Verse 7, endure hardship. In other words, run strong. To run strong, we have to run with endurance. And what's endurance? Well, it's the ability to get knocked down and get back up. It's the ability to take a hit and keep on going. It's the capability of carrying a heavy and a hard load. Here's the bummer about this. Endurance is not a gift that's bestowed on us by God. No. Endurance is something that grows in us. It's a character quality that we develop and can only be developed when we experience hardship. Hardship. And so this is the guts of this entire section of Hebrews. And I want to point out 5 ways that we can run with endurance. 5 ways to win at the race of life. And the first one comes right out of verse 1. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So here's number 1. Run the race God laid out for you. When I was in high school, I ran cross country. I didn't like running. I hate running. It's like some of you I know are runners. I'm not. It's like self-inflicted torture to run, especially cross country. And when I was on the cross country team at our little school, I had to run cross country because it's the same coach for the basketball team. And he said, hey, if you want to play basketball, you run. So I ran. And we'd always have these cross country meets on Saturday morning early, like 7:30. We'd run on golf courses. In the morning, 7:30, it's cold, 20 degrees. You could see your breath. There's frost all over the grass. The wind's blowing about 40 miles an hour. It's Wyoming, right? And it's July. And we go on these golf courses and we go, well, how do runners know where to run? Well, there was a flag, colored flag, that said if you hit this colored flag, you go left. If you hit this colored flag, you go right. If you hit this colored flag, you just keep going straight. If we're going to compete, we had to run the race marked out for us. I mean, I couldn't come to that race and you go, you know what, I'm going to compete here today, and get to the beginning and go, you know what, I really only have about 3K in me today, not 5. So when I get to the 3K marker, I'm just going to knock off. Just call it a day. Nor could I, if I was going to compete in that race, if there's a particularly nasty hill, to say, you know what, I don't really run up that hill. I'm just going to go around it. No, we have to run the race that's marked out for us. And God has a race. The race that you're running right now is the race that God has marked out for you. And it's the best possible course for you. And if we want to compete, we have to run that race. Although sometimes we wonder. And sometimes when we're running, we want to compare ourselves with other runners. God, why can't I run that person's race? I could win that race. Why can't I run with their paycheck, with their talent, with their opportunities? Or sometimes we look at our own limitations. I can't compete. I mean, I've got so many, I don't. If I was more beautiful, if I was better looking, if I had better health, if I didn't have this disability, if I was older, if I was younger, if I'd grown up in a better family, if I was married, then I could really, if we had kids, if our kids would ever graduate, then I could really run. If I had a better spouse. Comedian Wanda Sykes said this about marriage. They say marriage is a contract. No, it's not. Contracts come with warranties. If something goes wrong, you just return it to the manufacturer. If your husband starts acting up, you can't take him back to his mama's house and say to her, I don't know, he just stopped working. He's just laying around making funny noises. I mean, isn't it so easy to say, if I didn't have these limitations, or if I could run that person's race, then I could really compete. No. God says, I want you to run this race. The race I've marked out for you. It's your race. Can you accept that today? Can you just say, okay, God, even given all these difficulties that I have in my life now, that I've had to run through, this is the best race that could have been marked out for me, because that's the kind of God you are. Can you accept that today? This next point will help. Number 2, accept hardship as a necessity for growth. And I need to say this at the beginning of this point. Not all of the hardships that we face are God-caused. They're not. I mean, just read the story about the Garden of Eden, and you'll see that hardship entered into our lives because of choices human beings make, choices we make. A lot of our hardships we bring on ourselves. And there's an evil force in the world. So not all hardships are God-caused. God hates evil. And Jesus are going to great lengths to eliminate suffering and evil eventually. When Jesus stood at the tomb of his good friend Lazarus, who had just died, it says he wept. And that's kind of tame. What it really means is he raged. Jesus bellowed at the whole concept of death because he hates it so much. And so if you're in the middle of a tragedy, something that you're in very good company, because Jesus hates it too. And he rages and bellows against it. And eventually he will eliminate it. But the Bible also points out, especially in texts like this, that there's another perspective of hardship that we need to learn, or we're not going to be able to run the race with endurance. And here it is. Some suffering is necessary if we're going to grow. Whew. That's a hard one, isn't it? It is. Hebrews 12:11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. I mean, your doctor, when you go in for your physical, is going to tell you, especially as you get older, that you're not going to live a very healthy life or a very long life unless you're willing to groan and sweat. Your body will not be able to perform the normal daily activities unless we're willing to perform extraordinary activity called exercises, disciplines. You know what exercise is? You know what a treadmill is? It's taking a muscle and making it hard for it to do its job, to put stress on it. And unless that happens, we're going to get flabby and die young. Drew Carey, Drew Carey, comedian, said this. They say that exercise and a proper diet is are keys to a long life. Oh well. And so just as physical exertion, physical pain, actually the pain of training is absolutely necessary for health, so there is a sense in which everything that God allows in our lives as hardships are necessary and can be used for our growth. I mean, your commitment is never going to grow unless it's threatened. Your patience will never grow unless it's stretched, right? Your compassion is never going to grow unless it's exercised. Your courage is never going to grow unless it's challenged. And what this passage teaches is that we need to accept suffering, hardship, as an opportunity to grow. It's not easy, but it's necessary if we're going to have a robust faith and if we're going to learn to run with endurance. And here's another absolute paradox that flows right out of this passage, 2 Corinthians 12:10. That's why, for Christ's sake, Paul writes, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions. I delight in difficulties. Really? For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. I mean, what's Paul talking about? When I'm weak, then I'm strong. Well, let's go back to that exercise metaphor. I mean, I've told you that before, that part of my exercise routine is to do a lot of push-ups. And so when I'm doing a particular rep of push-ups, and the more push-ups I do, what's happening to my muscles? They're getting tired. They're getting stressed. My biceps, my triceps, my deltoids, my rhomboids, my pectorals, they're all getting stretched. And when I get to the end of a rep, what's happening? How am I feeling? Stronger or weaker? I mean, I'm feeling weaker. It's like, oh. But what's happening in my muscles? They're actually getting stronger. When I feel the weakest, when my muscles feel like spaghetti and I don't think I could do another one, guess what? That's when I'm gaining the most strength. That's how exercise works, and that's the way we build muscle. A few years ago, actually when we were early married, my wife and I were watching this movie, and the main actor was a man who was particularly known for his physique. The guy was just ripped, I'll just tell you that. And I don't know why this is, but he had a hard time keeping his shirt on all through the movie. Even though it took place on a snowy mountain and everybody else was wearing a snow parka. And there was one particular scene where his ripped chest is just in full view on the screen. And my wife looks at that, and then she looks over at me. And then she looks back, and she looks at me, and I go. And then she said this, Dennis, I've never been that attracted to well-built men. I think there's a compliment lurking in there somewhere. I haven't been able to find it. But here's the truth about doing those push-ups. When I feel the weakest, that's the time I'm developing the most strength. And that's going to be true in our hardships too. When we feel the weakest, when we feel like, I just cannot go on. This thing is so overwhelming. That's when we develop endurance. And how do we do it when we're feeling overwhelmed? When I'm doing the push-ups, what do? I just do the next one. I just keep doing the next right thing. And when you're experiencing a hardship, and your faith feels weak, or your patience feels weak, or your courage feels weak, just keep doing the next right thing, and that's how you develop strength. That's how you develop strength. But to do that, we're going to have to do number 3 as well. We're going to have to lean in to that hardship. Because we're going to face hardships almost every single day, and our natural tendency is to avoid them. We want to run around the big hill. We want to minimize it, ignore it. The last thing we want to do is lean into it. But look at verse 11 again. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful later on. It produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Circle the word trained. It's the word gymnazo, from which we get the word gymnasium. Why do we go to the gymnasium? Eat chicken wings, watch football, take a nap? No. We go to a gymnasium to work out. And there's only one reason to go there. It's to get fit. I looked up the names of the most popular gymnasiums in the country, and here's some of the names. Core Fit, Fitness Evolution, X Factor Fitness Solutions, Next Level Fitness. This one I wasn't sure about. Flirty Girl Fitness. Who is a member at that one? I don't know. Not one of these gyms had this name, Easy Fit, Comfort Fitness, No Sweat Fitness. Why? Because there is no such thing as easy or comfortable fitness. So where are we going to go to develop a fit faith? There's only one place, to the gymnasium of hardship. It's simply saying that when difficulties of life overwhelm us, when troubles overwhelm us, when sometimes tragedies overwhelm us, there's a way to lean into them, to see them as, okay, now I'm in the gymnasium. Now I'm going to work out. I'm going to groan. I'm going to sweat. But this is the place where I develop a fit faith. And just because there is no plan, just because it doesn't seem like there's a plan, it doesn't mean there isn't a plan, because there is a plan. We don't have to live in the gymnasium. We can't take a nap there. But if we want to run with endurance, we're going to have to go to the gymnasium of difficulty and work out there. You've heard the story after story of people who stand right up here, giving their stories here at Crossroads, and they'll often say things like this: I would never wish those troubles on anyone, but it's what God used to get my attention. Someone might say, at the time, I thought my life was ending. But looking back, I realized that's actually when my life really began. Or people will say this, I'm so grateful for that hardship. I wouldn't trade it for the world because it's made me what? The person I am today. We don't have to like hardships that come our way, but if we can learn to lean into them instead of away from them, then we can grow. And that's the only way we can grow. So many of the character qualities that we admire is to go into the gymnasium of fitness, of fit faith. And it helps if we do number 4, run together. Don't run alone. Look at verse 1. Since we, plural, are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, we're not alone. Let us, plural, throw off, and let us run the race with endurance. When we face a hardship or tragedy, our tendency is to pull back. It's to pull away. It's to isolate ourselves. Maybe because some of the difficulties we cause, we're embarrassed, or we feel guilty about that. Or sometimes we just feel vulnerable, we feel exposed, we feel weak. We don't want to see, we don't want people to know that I'm in this spot. We retreat from others sometimes, we retreat from God. We stop praying, we stop going to church. Some people stop eating, some people stop sleeping. People retreat from that stuff. But this verse says that we're surrounded by what? A great cloud of, not runners, witnesses. And what's a witness? It's someone who's experienced something already. Someone who's seen something already. Someone who's there to stand around and go, you know what? I understand hardship and difficulty. I've witnessed it. I've experienced it. Now I'm going to come alongside you because I just want you to know you don't have to run alone. Some of you have been through painful things. You're in painful things. Here's the good news. You don't have to run alone. There are people around you, there are people in this church who will run with you. They've experienced something probably very similar to you. You're experiencing a divorce, we have a divorce care group. You experienced a death, we have a grief share group. You're wondering about the holidays. How am I going to face the holidays? We have a couple of seminars coming up called Surviving the Holidays. We have Celebrate Recovery for people who've finally admitted to themselves, I cannot overcome this hurt, habit, or hang-up on my own. I've got to run together. If you're in a small group, stay in it. If you're not in one, get in one. There is no reason to run through the hardships of life alone. We can do it together. And here's number 5. Remember that God treats us as his children. See, even though the dominant metaphor in this passage is a race, a struggle, a wrestling match, when we get to verse 5, the metaphor dramatically changes. Right where we'd expect to see a coach or a personal trainer take center stage, the writer completely changes the metaphor. Verse 5, have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a what? As a father, as a parent addresses his son. Verse 7, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. Children. Why the change? And I think it's this reason is because when we're experiencing a hardship, when we're suffering, when we're in the middle of a tragedy, what we most need is not a coach. We need a caring, wise, firm parent who understands this hardship that we're in, might be self-imposed, and understands how to nurture and love and direct and guide and discipline us through it. That's what we need in that moment. The word discipline is used 10 times in these verses. And too often we think of discipline as punishment, as punitive, as payback. But it's unfortunate, especially in this context. The actual word for discipline is the word paideia, from which we get the word pediatrics. And what's a pediatrician? It's someone who's concerned about the entire whole well-being of a child. And the loving parent is the one who is concerned for the overall health and development and growth of the child. And that's the way God is with us. He wants us to grow up. He wants us to be able to face the hardships of life and not wimp out, but be prepared and ready. In order to do that, he has to allow hardship. He has to allow us to experience the consequences of our own, sometimes foolish decisions. Little Susie tells a lie. A loving parent doesn't say to Susie, "Aw, it's okay, you can lie." Because the parent knows that if she develops the character of a liar, what's life going to be like for her down the road? She'll have a miserable life. So the loving parent practices paideia, right? Susie, you cannot go to Johnny's birthday party. Wah! Shut the door. Is that punishment? No. Is it payback? Retribution? No, what is it? It's corrective suffering. That's what it is. It's character building suffering. It's a way to help Susie become a whole person. And those of us who are parents, we understand that we don't have the foresight and the insight to always parent our kids perfectly, do we? Verse 10 admits it. They, earthly parents, disciplined us for a little while as they thought best. But, in contrast, God disciplines us for our absolute good every single time, in order that we may share in His holiness, which means in order that we might grow up and learn to be mature people and enter into the loving kind of life God has for us and treat people the way people ought to be treated. Tim Keller writes this about this section. He says, that means God, as the perfect parent, will bring non-destructive, designed pain into a child's life, but not 1 ounce more, not 1 second more, not 1 millimeter more than the child absolutely needs, only for the good. And when that happens to us, when we're faced with particular hardship, we have a lot of choices to make, don't we? Blow it off, ignore it, be overwhelmed by it. Or we can go, you know what, God? This is the race you marked out for me. I'm going to accept this hardship as your design for me. You're trying to grow me up. You're trying to help me understand what it's like to run this race with endurance. That's what you're doing with me. And my response is to accept it, look for the training, be grateful to God, look for the good that He's bringing it, or not. It's up to us, isn't it? It's up to us. Because we're going to face hardships. We're going to face situations on our life where we're down on the track and we're in pain and we're not going to know what to do. And we're going to have to make a decision. And I want to go back to the story, the video that we started. I want to go back to Abby D'Agostino, who when Nikki Hamlin fell on the track and tripped her, her coach said, if that happens, you just get up and run. Later, the coach said she did the exact opposite of what the coach said. What did she do? She did the thing a loving parent would do. She stopped. She reached over to Nikki and she said, let's finish this thing together. Why did she respond that way? Why didn't she just get up? It's because she was prepared for a whole different kind of race. You know, the reporters didn't bring this out, but earlier in her racing career, Abby D'Agostino, 9-time NCAA champion runner for Dartmouth, said this: in my racing career, I had to make a decision what I was running for. I wanted to run for something greater than me, something that was secure, she said, and that was God. And when she went to the Olympics, she had this sense of, you know what? There's something bigger going on than the Olympics here. And she said when Nikki went down on the track and it tripped her, she realized, God, this is it. This is it. And she later wrote, although my actions were instinctual, she didn't decide in that moment what she was doing. She was prepared. And so it was just instinct for her. Her teammates said that Abby is one of the kindest people on the team. When you comment about Abby, you always talk about how kind she is. And she wrote this: although my actions were instinctual, the only way I can rationalize what I did is that God prepared my heart to respond that way. God has made it clear to me that my experience here at the Olympics was going to be about more than my race performance. And here's the good news for us, is that our experience of life is more than just our life performance. It's not about competing, about winning, about having the most at the end. It's about how we run. And it's about how we finish. Because we're all going to have to run with pain. We're going to have to all run with pain. We're going to have to all run through pain. And the good news is, you know what? A lot of those races aren't really going to matter in the end. What's the race that matters the most? It's the race of life. It's the race we're going to run this week. So I'll ask you, did Abby D'Agostino win? Did she win? Well, it depends on which race you're talking about. And as we finish our time today, what I want us to do is to have communion together. And one of the passages in this section that just sticks out to me is this one, verse 2. For the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. You see, Jesus had a race to run as well. It was the ultimate pentathlon. It was a fight to the death, a fight to the finish. And Jesus had a race marked out for him. In fact, when he was in the garden, he went to God the Father and said, "Is this the only way? Isn't there another way?" And God said, "No, Jesus, this is the race marked out for you." And Jesus ran it. He ran that race with endurance. He endured a brutal, ugly cross. He accepted it as a hardship. He leaned into it, didn't he? And when he died, people thought, "Oh, that's it. Jesus is down on the track. It's over. It's done. There's no hope." And everybody went home. And 3 days later, Jesus walks out of that tomb and said, "You know what? Your idea of my greatest failure was the moment of my greatest victory. Because I didn't run this race for me. I didn't run this race for me." I mean, look at this verse. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. What was the joy set before Jesus? I mean, what did Jesus have after he was crucified and rose from the dead that he didn't have before? An eternity with you, an eternity with me. That's the prize. That's the joy Jesus set before him. It was you and you and you and you and you. And if you've never responded to that, if you've never said to Jesus, "I want you to be the leader of my life. I receive your race for my race. Jesus, I'm down on the track. I need you to help me run my race." If you've never said that, you can do that. You can do that, and your first act of faith could be taking communion even today. And that's what we remember, and that's what we celebrate, because Jesus didn't have to run that race. He ran his race for you and for me. And I'm going to invite the band to come out now, and I'm going to invite our communion host to get prepared. They're going to gather up the elements back there. And in a minute, when the band begins to play, here's how we're going to do communion today. There's going to be stations with a couple of people at each one across the front here and across the back. And anytime during the song, you can just get up from where you are and come forward and take communion. And you don't have to be a member of Crossroads to participate with communion. Everybody's invited to take part in this. And what I want you to do is to take a piece of bread, it's gluten-free, all of it, and dip it in the juice. And then as you eat it, you can take it back to your chair or eat it right there. You just maybe say this: "Jesus, thank you for running your race for me. With your help, I'll run mine." I'll just say that again. You might just say, "Jesus, thank you for running your race for me. And with your help, I can run mine." So let's celebrate communion together. Invite the host to come forward.
The old things have passed away. Your love has stayed the same. Your constant grace remains the cornerstone. Things that we thought were dead are breathing in life
Let's pray together. Lord, we can face anything if we know that we're loved, if we know that we're loved by you. And we just experience communion, which reminds us of your demonstration of love for us. You gave your life for us, and now we want to give ours back in response to that love. So Lord, help us run our race this week no matter what we face, and we can with you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks for being here this weekend. If you'd like to get more connected here at Crossroads, stop and see one of our Next Step volunteers right out there. Have a cup of coffee. Have a great weekend.